Insiders, okay, cards on the table here, you guys. Is anyone advising any potential candidate or current politician before we get into it?
I am not.
Anyone,
no.
anyone? Okay, good to know. David, you've long had like really deep Liberal connections, and I'm so curious what you're hearing from people in the party right now. Also, whether any names are standing out to you.
Relief and fear. Relief that it finally happened, and that there's a chance that something different might occur. But a lot of uncertainty about the process and whether enough time is left to really make a difference. So I think Liberals are motivated and energized tonight, but I don't get the sense that anybody is Pollyannish about the challenge.
Are you hearing any names coming, sort of rising to the top, if you will?
Well, there are some names that are on everybody's lips. Mark Carney, for sure, is on everybody's lips. And there's a lot of talk about him. Chrystia Freeland is another person that a number of people are talking about. Dominic LeBlanc is somebody that I hear a lot about. And last, I would say the fourth name, if I was to put a top tier, would be Christy Clark out of British Columbia, who has probably the most advanced organization and really strong political skills.
Okay. So you mentioned Carney. He just released a statement tonight saying, and I'm quoting here, "I join Canadians in thanking the Prime Minister for his long record of contributions to this country and the many sacrifices he and his family have made for public service. I'm encouraged and honored by the support I've already been hearing from Liberal MPs and Liberals across the country who want us to move forward with positive change and a winning economic plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." So it's a pretty long statement from Mark Carney. And I'm curious, Amanda, you know, when you hear that, what strikes you?
I mean, I'm not surprised. We've all been part of leadership campaigns where, you know, they slowly do this kind of show a little bit of ankle, and then all of a sudden we may or may not going to run. Conservatives, I think, broadly would love the opportunity. I mean, they'd love the opportunity to run against the Prime Minister, but if they can't get that opportunity, I think they'd love the opportunity to run against Mark Carney. You know, they've been out very aggressively framing him, his carbon tax Carney, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that they feel very well poised to do so. And I think in particular is painting him as someone who is elite and out of touch with the concerns of everyday Canadians. So, you know, I think broadly, most of these candidates, when I look at them, there's no one that really strikes fear in the hearts of any Conservatives that I've been talking to so far, but obviously we'll continue to see how they position themselves going forward.
I mean, it is interesting. You hear the Conservatives at this point, you know, before it was all, this is all about Trudeau, and now it's all like, you know, well, Trudeau wasn't really the problem. He was, you know, they're all the same. So I feel like that's the message we're going to hear, certainly for the next 77 days, plus. Shachi, you know, for all this talk about the politicians and their views, I know that you have been doing some polling into how Canadians are feeling about this moment, feeling about this country, and I'm curious what the story is there. Like, how are Canadians right now?
There is a significant plurality of Canadians who were of the view that it was time for the Prime Minister to go. A majority felt that he should go. A plurality wanted to see an election call as soon as possible, over and above a prorogation. So, you know, there is a class of Canadians who are thoroughly political creatures who have been, you know, following every twist and turn of this. And then there are those who are less dialed in, but are no less aware of the events of the last 3 weeks, which have been so seminal and really did just sort of mark the final death rattle for the Prime Minister with Chrystia Freeland's resignation. Canadians were not only really unimpressed with the way the Prime Minister had comported himself around that, it's actually put a little bit of wind in Chrystia Freeland's sails in terms of the data that we've been collecting in terms of her political fortunes should she choose to run. But I want to come back to what you were talking about earlier, which is the difference between maybe staving off absolute annihilation or humiliation. We did polling that came out New Year's Eve that showed the absolute floor for the Liberals was looking like 13% of vote intention. Wow. Call that 16% decided and leaning voters. That's not good. Like, it really, I don't know how to be any more explicit than that. It was untenable for the Prime Minister, and we all listened. This is the Insiders panel, but I feel like a little bit like an outsider around this, because I listen to data and I go where data takes me, more so than what caucus might be saying or what other political watchers might be saying. And over the years, there were so many moments where the political watching world had pronounced last rites on the Prime Minister's career. But this time with those numbers, there really did not seem to be a path back. So coming back to who might replace him, what we find with a lot of these contenders is they might create a little bit more altitude for a plane that is, losing altitude very quickly. Maybe it creates the conditions for a crash landing where people survive, but it's not, at this stage. And of course, polling does represent a snapshot in time. But this snapshot is showing, look, a replacement can stave off humiliation. It can perhaps put the Liberals in a place where they've got a caucus that could possibly form opposition. But the notion of going for a fourth term with a lot of people who have been close to the Prime Minister in one way or another is going to be a very tough sell.
Wow, what a picture that paints. David, given all that, does this indicate to you that the Liberal brand itself has a future at all right now?
Well, I don't really accept Sachi's conclusion. And I don't think it can be drawn from her data. I think that she's testing people that most Canadians are unfamiliar with. So they don't move the numbers right now, but there's going to be a leadership contest that's going to attract a lot of attention. And there's going to be an election campaign after that. They'll be well known, whoever it is, by the time the election happens. That doesn't mean they'll be more successful, but it certainly can't be said right now just because Dominic LeBlanc doesn't move the numbers really well that he might not 2 months from now. And, there's a lot of evidence at the provincial realm of unpopular late-term governments changing their leaders and successfully winning the next election campaign. And it is the case that both Turner and Campbell improved their party standings by about 20 points when they took over. So all of this is possible. Does that mean Shachi's fundamentally wrong? Probably not. The odds of the Liberal Party winning this election are pretty remote. But it is quite possible, in my mind, for the Liberal Party to, at the end of the election, be at 30-some points with 100 and some seats. Because right now we're in an artificial world. 45% of Canadians are not conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre is currently getting the votes of people who disagree with him on issues. And he's getting them because people hate Justin Trudeau. That's no longer there. It's a new dynamic. We'll see.
Of how Republicans and Donald Trump's orbit reacted to Trudeau's
So I'm curious, Amanda, if you're one of the people running to replace Trudeau, given everything you're hearing, what's your move?
I mean, I think you saw Chrystia Freeland do it, right? Which is you stab a knife into his heart. I think you have to run in the opposite direction from the Prime Minister if you are one of his cabinet ministers. Now, will that be possible? That remains to be seen, right? They have been part and parcel working alongside him to pass the carbon tax, which, as we know, is wildly unpopular. So they can change their mind. Politicians have done so. I think it'll be a big lift for some of them. I think they have to, just basically distance themselves as immediately as quickly as possible. The easiest folks that will be able to do that, obviously, you could say, would be Christy Clark or Mark Carney. Now, Mark Carney is an economic advisor to this government, and that is a challenge for him. And I think he'll be tied closely to the PM. Christy Clark probably has the best chance to do so. But even she is on record, for example, promoting when she was premier, raising and increasing the car. So that issue, I think, is going to be challenging for all of them. But if I'm them, I run away from the PM, his record as much as possible. But at the end of the day, it's a Liberal leadership. So they also have to make sure they're not poisoning the chalice within the party and angering one another. So they have to appeal to other party members, which is going to be a challenge while also thinking through the general electorate. So they have to kind of do a two-pronged strategy, which is very difficult to do.
Okay, funny you should use that phrase, poisoning the chalice, because I think for all the people who had conversations with family and friends over the holidays about what might be happening next with the government, I don't know how many times I heard people say, I don't know, whoever assumes the leadership, is it not getting a poison chalice? I mean, is this anything other than that if you are an ambitious politician and you win this leadership race? Anybody who wants to take that on.
Well, David would certainly say that not necessarily. He disagrees with my conclusions around the person coming in late term. But the fact is that it's a tough hill to climb. I hope we can agree on that. Yes, there have been instances of improbable repeat elections. Christy Clark did pull that off in 2013. We saw Kathleen Wynne do it in Ontario against all odds. But more often than not, history shows us that these things usually end one way. Now, it still could be worth it if you're looking to build your name, build back the caucus, build back what the party is supposed to stand for. It does speak to a moment in time to show yourself on the campaign trail, to test the waters against the other leaders and show that you can take the fight if you've still got that fight. But at the same time, at some point in the cycle of Canadian federal governments, around the 8 to 10 year mark, more often than not, that milk turns sour. Yep. We saw it, at the end of the Mulroney era. We saw it at the end of the Chrétien era, yep, both with new leaders. We saw it at the end of the Harper era. And I tend to be someone who says, look, history is something that we shouldn't ignore, even if we open the door for the art of the possible.
Right, I'm going to have to cut you off there, but ma'am, we have a lot more talking to do. Listen, David, Amanda, Shashi, thank you all.
Thank you.